Now you may be asking why your prayers are not being answered. And maybe you've never had prayers answered. Or maybe every once in a blue moon, you'll have a prayer answered. And you're wondering, why in the world does it happen this way? When I read in the Bible that whatever we ask for, we'll receive. If I have faith as little as a mustard seed, I can say to this mountain, move, and it'll be moved and thrown into the sea. And yet when I pray, I can't get what I'm asking for. God won't give it to me. What is up with that? What's up with that? What do you think is up with that? Well, we're going to read two passages here, short passages. One's in Matthew 6. You know where I'm going. This is the Lord's Prayer. Jesus taught his disciples how to pray, and this is for us as well. It actually starts in verse 5 of chapter 6, but a lot of teachings will start in verse 9. So let's start in 5. Jesus says, and when you pray, you shall not be like the hypocrites. For they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the corners of the streets, that they may be seen by men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. Now you say, well, hold on a minute. They didn't have churches back then. So would that be the equivalent of praying in church? Perhaps. But you, when you pray, go into your room, and when you have shut your door, pray to your Father who is in secret, in the secret place. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. And when you pray, do not use vain repetitions as the heathen do, for they think that they will be heard for their many words. So verse 7 in the rooted word says, but yourselves wishfully praying forward, you may not stammer over words, just as the ethnicities. For they are thinking that in the wordiness of them, they will be heard. That their prayers will go into God's ear. Because there's into in this in the Greek. Certainly you may not be assimilated to them. For the Father of you, your Father, has seen that which you are holding a need for being furnished before you of the thing ask him. So then it goes into the prayer. All right? But the thing I want to draw attention to is this. Look at how it's structured. Verse 9. In this manner, therefore, pray. Our Father in heaven, I'm reading the New King James. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. You say, what does hallowed mean? It means to be made holy. You say, oh, set apart. No, that's a whole different word. You hear this mistake constantly with these teachers who are uneducated. The word is holy, which means terrifyingly clean. Not set apart, it's terrifyingly clean. Jesus was not set apart outside of the crowds. He sat amongst them, but he was terrifyingly clean. And they had respect because of that. Even the ones who wanted to murder him. It says here, our Father in heaven, your name must be made holy and kept holy. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Okay? Now we get to the interesting part here. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And do not lead us into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. For if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. That's from the statement right in the middle of the Lord's Prayer. Jesus decided to restate that same statement, this smack dab in the middle of the Lord's Prayer. And he's doing it at the end. Why is he doing that? It's to emphasize what prayer should be structured as. Prayer is not just begging God for something, but it's asking God as well as stating your commitment to do what pleases Him with your actions. Why is that important in prayer? Turn to James. From where do the turnings back and forth and wars in you all come? Are they not from out of the pleasures which serve militantly in your members? You misplace your passion by superimposing it on its object of lust, and that drives you toward the need to breathe and rush in an attitude of sacrifice. Yet you do not have. You slay with criminal intent and are hated within, yet you are unable to make it happen for yourselves. You ask and you do not receive directly because you ask in a worthless manner, so that you might devour with your pleasure what you receive. You adulterers and adulteresses, do you not know that the friendship of the mass of individuals is hatred of God? It is true, whoever might be willing to be a friend of the mass of individuals has already been positioned as a hater of God. All right, let's talk about this, because this is extremely important. And you may have heard teachings on it, but they haven't connected it strongly enough, probably. So we're going to connect this strongly enough. Now look at this. It says, where do turnings back and forth and wars in you all come? Are they not from out of the pleasures which serve militantly in your members? You're flipping back and forth and being unreliable and unfaithful. It's because of the pleasures which are militantly in your members, serving militantly in your members of your body. Those pleasures that are serving militantly in the members of your body are causing you to vacillate, are causing you to be unfaithful and unreliable. And until you get those under control, you will never be reliable. You'll be like the man tossed back and forth on the sea and thrown down shockingly quick on his face. This says, you misplaced your passion. So it's not saying you shouldn't have passion. It's saying you're misplacing it. You misplaced your passion by superimposing it on its object of lust. You've made an object of lust. You've made an object of lust. You put your pleasures onto this. This is now the recipient of your feelings of pleasure. You misplace your passion by superimposing it on its object of lust. I say pleasure because in the previous verse it says, are they not from out of the pleasures which serve militantly in your members? Militantly in your members of your body, all of them, not just your hands and legs and your tongue, but your ears also and your eyes. You misplace your passion by superimposing it on its object of lust, and that drives you toward the need to breathe and rush in an attitude of sacrifice. You misplace your passion by superimposing it on its object of lust, and that drives you toward the need to breathe and rush in, breathe hard, and rush in an attitude of sacrifice, to sacrifice for this. Yet you do not have. You are sacrificing out of lust that is in your members warring against you. and you're trying so hard to get what you want, that thing or those things that you're praying for, it says, yet you do not have. Why don't you have? You're trying so hard. Why don't you have? It says, you slay with criminal intent and are heated within. Yet you are unable to make it happen for yourselves. Yet you do not have, yet you are unable to make it happen for yourselves. You slay with criminal intent and are heated within. And despite all of that, you're unable to make it happen for yourself. That's a pretty frustrating situation, where you're thinking that you have to make this happen and you're trying so hard and you cannot make it happen. Maybe there's something in your life right now that I've just touched that's tender and you're reacting to. That's good. That's good. That means you still have a conscience. You ask, verse 3, you ask, you pray, you ask and you do not receive. That's exactly what we're talking about right here today on this video. I'm asking, but I'm not receiving. I'm trying so hard and I'm not able to do it for myself. And I'm doing this with passion and I don't have it. It says, you ask and you do not receive directly because, if I ran across that reading the Bible, I would stop and go, hold on a minute, pay attention here, maybe even take notes. You ask and do not receive directly because you ask in a worthless manner. You ask in a worthless manner. What are you going to use that for that you're asking God for? You're asking God for something. What is your intention to use that for? And be honest. Don't throw up a smoke screen. Don't put out the answer that you know you should have in your heart, but don't. I want you to pause the video and I want you to write in the comment down below what you have been praying for that you are not getting. And then I want you to be honest with God. I want you to write a quick, small sentence to God. God, I admit that I want to use this for this purpose. Be honest. Don't give the answer that you know everyone wants to hear. Don't give the answer you know is the right answer. Give the answer which is in your heart, that you know you would do if you got it. What would you really do if you got it? I want you to write that. Write what you're praying for, and then write another sentence that says, God. Okay? I want to see that in the comments down below. A lot of you are not doing your part in the gospel right now. Many of you stopped commenting. Many of you are still commenting, but many of you stopped. And it's dramatically hurting the videos. You need to start doing your part again. And I wouldn't have to speak like this to you if you were doing your part. Now, would I? Your part in the gospel here on YouTube is for you to watch the whole video. Because the longer you watch that whole video, this video, YouTube then says this is important. We're going to go ahead and recommend this to others. Also, you need to click the like button. No one's clicking the like button. Get maybe 4 or 5 likes. That's it. Get 100 views and 4 or 5 likes. We got 1,000 subscribers and 4 or 5 likes on a video. You need to be liking the video and making a comment. Comment can even be just an emoji, but something. Every one of you must be making a comment under every video on this channel that you watch. It takes you 3 seconds. There's no excuse. Clicking the like takes less than that. 1 second is done. Total of 4 seconds, you got the like and a comment. And watching the whole video is for your benefit. Is for your strengthening in the body of Christ, the church. So watch the whole thing. So let's finish this verse here, because it's extremely important on the end. You ask and you do not receive directly because you ask in a worthless manner. Then he says what that worthless manner is. So that you might devour with your pleasures what you receive. Now pleasures, if you look back in verse 1, it says, are they not from out of the pleasures which serve militantly in your members? Your pleasures serve militantly in your members. And this says here, so that you might devour with your pleasures, which serve militantly in your members, what you receive from God. That's the worthless manner with which you're asking for things in prayer. And you know it. You know it. God knows it, but you know it. And then, probably the strongest, harshest declaration against Christians in a church in the New Testament is right here in Jacob 4:4, aka James. You adulterers and adulteresses. Wow, he doesn't leave out the women. You adulterers and adulteresses, and he doesn't mean that literally, because remember in the Old Testament that Israel was called an adulteress when she would commit idolatry against God, chasing after other gods, just like a wayward wife chases after other men. Shameful. Do you not know that friendship of the mass of individuals is hatred of God? It is true, whoever might be willing to be a friend of the mass of individuals has already been positioned as a hater of God. You must position yourself as a pleaser of God, not a hater of God. Do you think that you will be saved if you are a hater of God? What it says, exactly what it says. Hater of God. Hatred of God. Hater of God. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You had better get your priorities straight. And if you say, Ron, I can't. It's too hard. Look at what Jesus taught us to pray. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. He taught us to pray with a stipulation of receiving based on our character towards others. Same things here. What is your behavior towards others? If you receive from God this thing, how are you going to use it? What are you going to do with it? You're going to use it for your pleasures? Now, some things, you'll have pleasures from it, but the question is whether you're asking for it in order to devour it, it says, so that you might devour with your pleasures what you receive, and it's gone. You're asking for something, and you devour it with your pleasures, and it's gone like a vapor. And you're left wanting still like you were before. And so God will not give it to you. If that's your desire, your intention, that's why God is not answering your prayers. Do you have faith to walk on water? Because what we're called to do as Christians is walk on water. What we're called to do as Christians, from a human standpoint, seems impossible. And so when I talk to people in the churches, not necessarily in the church, but they're in the churches, and I tell them, Jesus called us to stop sinning. Paul said directly, sin not. John says that you may not sin. I'm writing this, dear children, to you so that you may not sin. Peter says, quoting God from the Old Testament, now to Christians as a command, be terrifyingly clean, as I am terrifyingly clean. And I say this to Christians and they can't believe it because it seems impossible. It's something that they can't even imagine is possible because they are so rooted in a worldly view of Christianity. Even if they had been saved at one point, that yeast worked its way through that batch of dough, for sure. Because now they see everything as a carnal Christian. Dare I even use those two words together? May it never be that we be carnal Christians, Christians of the flesh. The works of the flesh are sin. Paul says clearly in Galatians 5:19 through 21, listing them out, some of them as examples. If you're a carnal Christian, you're a Christian of sin. Do you know how despicable and disgusting that is to God? That He would call you out of the world. That He would wash you clean in the blood of Jesus Christ and through baptism clean your conscience and stand you upright, clean from head to toe, inside out. And you turn around back to wallowing in the mud. You go back to where you vomited and start eating it again. These are two things Jesus said to refer to people who do exactly what these Christians are claiming is a normal Christian experience. And then if you tell them they have to stop sinning, then they're going to try to trap you, they think. Saying, whoa, have you stopped sinning? When did you stop sinning? They want to interrogate you to prove you're wrong. Nothing about me. It's nothing about me. They want to attack the human being. They can kill me if they want. It doesn't change this. It doesn't change what God said. Even if they kill me, even if I should fall away and betray my Lord, may it never, ever be. That doesn't change one speck here. If your prayers are not being answered, I would look at this first as the source of that. Or as Jesus said, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Is there someone you haven't forgiven? Because if you have, it's hindering your prayer. Because in the middle of the prayer that Jesus taught us how to pray, says, forgive us our trespasses as we. So if you don't forgive, you won't be forgiven. Those trespasses that you've done will not be forgiven if you do not forgive the trespasses done against you. And if your trespasses are not forgiven, God will not answer your prayer except for one thing. There's one thing you can pray for that God will give to you even when you are in the worst situation with God. Jacob chapter 1 verse 5. But if any one of you leaves himself behind because he does not have enough wisdom, he must make an urgent request to God. He must truly desire wisdom and be confident God will give it to him and it will be given. He can be sure that he will receive wisdom from God and that God gives sincerely to all without naming faults. The only thing you can receive in prayer when you're at bad odds with God is wisdom. But notice what it says. He must make an urgent request to God. He must truly desire wisdom. If you do not truly desire wisdom and you're asking for wisdom, you will not get it. And you must be confident God will give it to you. And if you're not, it won't be given. But if you try to govern your own life by doing what you think you should do instead of what God says you should do, he mentions this directly next. Also of equal importance, that man must ask in faith as well as urgency, desire, and confidence, because the persuasion you hold requires that you do not depend on your own ability to govern your own life in anything. When someone depends on his own governing of himself, he turns out to be just like a violent agitation seen on the ocean, where the wind drives him back and forth and then throws him flat on the ground shockingly quick. The man who depends on his own ability to govern his own life cannot possibly imagine that he will receive anything from the Lord except wisdom. So, if your prayers are not being answered, I would say the first thing to do is cry and beg for wisdom from God and believe that He's going to give it to you. And when He gives you that wisdom, you've got to use it correctly. You have to. Find out who you haven't forgiven, who's trespassed against you. Go back through your history. Find out who trespassed against you, who you didn't forgive, and forgive them. Because there's something God is not forgiving you if He's not answering your prayer. And I guarantee if that's the case, it's because you haven't forgiven someone else. You've been locked up and thrown into the jailer to pay every penny back where you could have been forgiven. But because you wouldn't forgive your fellow man, you're locked up and thrown in. That's why your prayers are not being answered. But if you have forgiven those who trespassed against you, and you're sure of that, you can ask God, say, please give me wisdom to identify, again wisdom, to identify anyone who might have wronged me that I didn't forgive. Write their name down, write what they did. Be brief, like, 2 or 3 words. And then pray and ask God to accept your forgiveness of them. But I would look directly at what your motive is for asking for what you're praying for. You're going to devour it with your pleasures that war militantly in your members, that serve militantly in your members. You got to throw that out. You have to be willing to use that in a godly way. That doesn't mean that everything you receive you're going to use in some way to form a new ministry and preach the gospel or reach out to people of a certain demographic group. That's a smokescreen. That's a delusion. No, that is not scriptural at all. So let me summarize what we've just gone over. That there are 3 things in these verses that I've read you that can hinder your prayers from being answered. They will stop your prayers from being answered. The first one is not forgiving someone who has trespassed against you, who has offended you, who has done something against you where you hold something against them for it. And maybe it's a just cause. But I'm sure that people had just causes to hold against you before you became a Christian and were saved and forgiven by Jesus Christ. And so right in the middle of the prayer, Jesus puts it. And then again at the end, He puts it. That in the same way, your Father in heaven will not forgive you if you do not forgive others. Your prayer will not be answered, because that is about prayer. The prayer depends on you forgiving those who trespass against you. And forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those as we forgive those who trespass against us. So number one is unforgiveness. Okay? That will hinder your prayer. It will stop your prayer from being answered. Because God will not forgive you if you do not forgive others. Unforgiveness stops your relationship with God. No matter what you may think, it stops your relationship with God. Number two, we went over in the book of Jacob, chapter 1, where only wisdom was possible to receive from God in this situation where you're trying to govern your own life. You will not submit to the governance of God over your life. You want to govern your own life. And in that case, you should not imagine that you will even receive anything from off of God, alongside God, except wisdom, which is mentioned a verse before. So, number two that will stop your prayers from being answered is you taking the reins of your own life to try to control it, instead of letting God govern it. I mean, not just making sure that your life is under the governance of God. It's purposeful. Number three, also in Jacob, chapter 4. What you're asking for in wrong motives, even though you may think that your motives are pure, or at least pure enough. You want to devour them with your pleasures. Whatever it is that you're going to get from God, you want to devour with your pleasures. And that can be seen that your pleasures are ruling your life because you are striving hard to get what you're asking God to give you. And you're not getting it. By your own efforts, you're not getting it. And you're struggling and striving to get it by your own efforts, while you're asking God for it. And yet you're not getting it, and you're getting angry within, whether it's at God or at someone else, or in some other situation that seems unrelated. That heat and that hatred within to kill is in you in that situation. That tells that you want to spend that on your pleasures. You want to not just spend it, devour it, is what it says in the text. So number one, unforgiveness. Number two, governing your own life. Number three, secretly wanting to devour the thing that you're asking God for, to devour by your pleasures. Those three things will stop your prayers from being answered. If your prayers are not being answered, you better look at each one of those three things and ask for wisdom. Because you know, whatever the situation is, God will give you wisdom. If you truly desire it and you truly believe that He will, then He will. And He will not even name any faults of yours. May the Lord bless you as you seek Him with all your heart.